The Denver Broncos and head coach Sean Payton are embracing a contingency plan at the tight end position with Lucas Krull. Is that why they stood pat? We'll break it down much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Every single day, you can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So if you're a longtime listener or viewer, or if you're brand new to Locked on Broncos and you like the show, make sure you do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long, because for the true fan, there is never an offseason. We have you covered every step of the way. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Broncos as a reporter for Mile High Sports. Joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger. He's been covering the Broncos for a long time. He's the site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com. Check out our written work, milehighsports.com, predominantlyorange.com. Get in on the action here. But Sayre, look, today's episode going to embrace a little bit of a mailbag here from Broncos Country. There are a lot of questions we got in. We're going to entertain whether or not Justin Simmons could potentially come back to Denver. We'll look at, was the Zach Wilson trade a waste of time for the Broncos organization? But we're going to kick things off here today by asking the question, how could the Broncos solidify the tight end room in 2024? They passed on taking a tight end in this year's NFL draft. No, they have a couple of undrafted rookie free agent invites that will be in the building for Friday's rookie minicamp. But more importantly, it seems like at this point, Sean Payton is embracing a contingency plan at tight end with Lucas Krull. As we all know, last year, they put the eggs in the Greg Dulcich basket. It didn't work out, and then it bit Denver in the end last season. But Lucas Krull is a guy who showed some flashes and had a little bit of some emergence and some facets for the Broncos offense. And now with a quarterback like Bo Nix under center, different play style than what they had with Russell Wilson, tell you what, Bo likes tight ends too. So we'll see if that's going to be the case here for the Broncos. Is Sean Payton comfortable with the tight end position? Because this was a question we got sent in from our good friend Mile High Moments on Twitter.
He's got to be at least a little comfortable with it, right? I mean, when you consider the fact the Broncos could have taken a guy like Theo Johnson in the fourth, they traded up to get Troy Franklin. They could have gotten Theo Johnson at that point. They didn't even take the Colorado State guy. I mean, I know they brought him in for a visit and they didn't even sign him as an undrafted player. So kind of interesting there. When you look at this tight end class in the draft, it wasn't exactly the hallmark of the draft, although the Broncos did open things up by passing on Brock Bowers, who will now be playing for the division rival Las Vegas Raiders. And so you look at this offseason as a whole, the tight end position it's not overly, I guess, player friendly at this point in time, Cody, right? When you look at the prices that these guys are getting, former Broncos first round pick Noah Fant getting a deal worth just over $10 million per season. I mean, that's pretty palatable in today's NFL when you're talking about playmakers at an offensive skill position. And so the Broncos not being willing to go out and spend money at the position the last 2 years, quite frankly, you get Adam Troutman back. I feel like they may be very confident in what Lucas Krull brings to the table as a pass catching threat, especially given the injury concerns with Greg Dulcich, because look, Greg Dulcich is kind of the ultimate wild card at this position, isn't he? He's kind of that X factor to where it's like, well, if he can stay healthy, man, you saw what he did back in his rookie season, immediately coming onto the field and having a tremendous impact on the game. And then you see the impact when he's not out there, or when you're not able to have somebody like that out there for long stretches of time. So you get the impression, the way they've approached the free agency and the draft the last 2 years, that the Broncos, they may actually be pretty confident in what Lucas Krull brings to the table.
And the best ability is availability. And unfortunately for Greg, look, and I always like to approach it, and I want to preface this by saying, once again, I always have to bring this up as a reminder when we talk about these guys. A lot of fans get mad at the player for getting hurt, as if it's like they went out there and decided, like, I'm going to go out there and screw up my hamstring. Like, that's not the case. You know, Greg has been so frustrated by it. The Broncos have been frustrated by it. And look, it's frustrating for fans who, like, fans have seen what Greg can do, right? And I think that's where the frustration really comes in, is like, hey, this guy, when he's healthy, he can be a dynamic game changer for you on the offensive side of the ball. As bad as the Broncos offense has been the last couple of years, he's been a little bit of a bright spot. He's been a flash in the pan for what the Broncos and what fans have maybe wanted for that position. But, you can't just go into 2024, even though it's a new year, you can't go into it with a new slate saying, okay, hey, he's going to stay healthy this year. This is just, we're going to have to wait and see here with Greg Dulcich. But the Broncos just can't be in a wait and see type of mode. They have to have a plan in place. And so obviously re-signing Adam Troutman this offseason, that was something that George Payton, Sean Payton wanted to get done. He got thrust into the number one tight end role last year. I mean, he was the number one guy on the depth chart, even in the training camp before Greg Dulcich even had his injury. But he's not really your number one guy. If you're relying on him to be your number one pass catching option at the tight end position, something is wrong there. And that's not an indictment on Adam Troutman. I think Adam Troutman is best suited for a role. Hey, it's third down, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. He's going to be a chain mover for you. He's a guy you want to look at when everyone else is focusing on Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick or Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin. Like, he's a guy you're like, hey, this is a reliable guy on third down. We're going to keep going to this guy if the defense gives us that look here. But they also have Lucas Krull, who I said probably a couple months ago, Sayre. Now I'm going to stay firm on my stance, plant my flag and say, Broncos country, if you are looking for a player who is going to have a big role, in my opinion, early on right now, that you're going to be like, wow, okay, hey, he said pay attention to this guy early on back in the month of May. Lucas Krull, I think, is going to probably be the most impactful player at the tight end position for the Broncos this season, barring injury or barring something else happening. I think that Lucas Krull, Sean Payton is putting a plan in place that, hey, we can't just rely on one guy. We're going to really try to figure out, if we're missing this guy, how can our tight end position still be productive, even if there are injuries, even though that we are keeping the tight end room the same. To me, I think that's how the Broncos can solidify the tight end position. I think it's why George Payton, Sean Payton have really kind of stood pat a little bit. Part of me is also wondering, is the tight end position becoming a little bit less valuable in terms of, your options out there in free agency or, the options in this year's NFL draft? Like you mentioned, we talked about a couple of athletic options, but Denver just, there was more pressing needs in terms of where Denver saw more value at another position than tight end. So I think that is an interesting conversation in and of itself. And then Mile High Moments also throws in here in his question. He asks, any idea why Denver chose a wide receiver in the 7th round when Dallin Holker was available? Look, I think the idea of Holker, who played his football at Colorado State, he made some impressive plays for CSU this past season. Obviously, I think he caught 2 balls during the NFL Combine on one entire run through down the line there, which was really impressive. But overall, his testing wasn't great. Not a great 40-yard dash. Not a great vertical jump there. His 3-cone, and obviously that right there was impressive. It was elite in terms of that category. But he's not a guy that you're gonna like, hey, I'm gonna go throw a jump ball to this guy. He's gonna come down with it. He's a guy that can do stuff yards after the catch. I think that's why the Saints took a flyer on him initially. But Denver just had more pressing needs, and I think that was the overall emphasis for George and Sean is, hey, we have more important needs on our roster we need to address. And look, there's going to be some shuffling that's going on here in the next couple of days and even the weeks here before the team gets ready for OTAs and minicamp itself. But Broncos country, want to ask your question here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Are you comfortable with the Broncos tight end position right now? And do you believe that Sean Payton has a contingency plan in place with Lucas Krull in case Greg Dulcich can't stay healthy? That's a question we're throwing out here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. One thing we're going to dive deep into, we got another question from our good friend Ed Helinski on Twitter, who's going to ask us a question, whether or not Zach Wilson, was he a waste of time in terms of trading for him, or is there some redeemable factor in him potentially this upcoming season? Sayre and I, we're going to break that down and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Broncos country, today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Yahoo Finance. And when it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can, and now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, and that is Yahoo Finance, where you can find everything, all the information that you need, how to best manage your finances and stay ahead of the game. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking to get that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and all the data that you need in one place. And their site is super easy to navigate and to use, where you can find all the necessary information that you need. They're the #1 financial destination, producing a holistic view on the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, Visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is also brought to you by our friends over there at eBay Motors. And look, Broncos Country, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Zach Wilson is anything but a waste of time. In fact, the opposite. It's a great investment of the Broncos' time, resources, money, and ability to potentially develop the quarterback position. Cody and I are going to talk about that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, where we're answering some of your questions, Broncos Country. And we can't thank you enough for being part of this show every single day. For all you everyday listeners out there, Cody and I, mile high salute to you. We appreciate every single one of you listening to us, free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, where you can also watch the show on YouTube. And if you subscribe over there, we really appreciate that as well. We want to continue to grow that channel this offseason. Let's talk about why Zach Wilson is anything but a waste of time for the Denver Broncos. Cody, as a question came in from Ed Helinski on Twitter, just straight up, is Zach Wilson a waste of time, or is he redeemable? I like this question because it offers us the opportunity to talk about why I would say he's definitely not a waste of time. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this, because the quarterback position is such a premium position in today's NFL. It's an area where, man, you want to throw darts. You want to bring in guys that you believe in. What are your thoughts on this, though? Especially after drafting Bo Nix, like, is having a first round pick on the roster the right time to try a reclamation project that I personally have been calling for since Sean Payton was hired? Is this the right time, or do you think Zach Wilson is it a good investment of time, energy, money, development? What do you say?
I think it's a good chance to take in terms of a potential dart throw. But look, I want to preface that statement right there by saying, when we look at the Broncos quarterback room with Bo Nix there, I think everyone, and look, Sean, the illusion, I think the narrative you're going to see this offseason is going to be, well, hey, there's three quarterbacks on this roster. We'll dive deep into that here in a minute. These three guys are going to compete for the starting job. I don't think it's going to be that. To be honest with you, it's going to be Bo Nix day one here for the Broncos. I think more importantly at this point, it's going to be Zach Wilson versus Jarrett Stidham in training camp for the backup job, right? And there's a multitude of factors I think that we can go in here. And look, here's why I think it could be redeemable, right? No one's saying that Zach Wilson's going to come in and lead the Denver Broncos to a Super Bowl. And I don't think that would even be in the plan. Like, obviously, Denver wanted to add a veteran guy regardless. And you look at Zach Wilson athletically, he has some really impressive traits. His overall body of work, like there's moments in his game where it's like, all right, hey, he like shows flashes. And then there's moments it's like, man, this guy's he's not that good. Like, he just keeps making the same mistake over and over and over and over again, and he's not learning from it. But you get him into an environment, you get him into a building where, look, you have Davis Webb, you have Sean Payton, you have Pete Carmichael, Joe Lombardi. Like, you have this established offensive brain trust here now under Sean Payton, where it's like, let's take a little bit of what Zach does well. Let's see what we can do with it. Now, is it going to work? Nobody knows. But I think this is more so redeemable in the context of the Broncos' backup quarterback position than it has anything to do with him potentially starting down the road, even though he has vastly more starting experience in the NFL than Jarrett Stidham does at this point. So for me, I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's going to play out in training camp where Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, they compete for the backup job. And in some context too, to Jarrett Stidham, really, for the Broncos, they can save money by Zach Wilson being the backup quarterback to Bo Nix this upcoming season. Jarrett Stidham's cap hit this year, $7 million. You release him, it's a $2 million dead cap, but you free up $5 million in cap space. Ideally, I think this is why they wanted to do it. They want to elevate that room a little bit. They like Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett's a great guy, But Zach Wilson has, I think, more established traits to him that maybe give him an advantage on paper, at least, going into this competition here in July. Now, how do you perceive it? Like, for me, I always think it's backup quarterback between these two guys. How do you see it playing out? Do you think that all three of these guys are going to compete for the starting job, or are you in the same boat as me?
I'm kind of in the same boat as you on this one, Cody. I really don't feel like it should be a battle for the starting position. I think it should be Bo Nix from day one. But at the same time, look, I mean, Zach Wilson was the second overall pick in 2021. The ink is still drying on every team's scouting report of the guy. I mean, he hasn't even finished a rookie contract yet in the NFL. And we're seeing a lot of other guys like, Baker Mayfield getting second and third chances and Sam Darnold getting second and third. Sam Darnold, what did he do last year to earn a $10 million deal from the Minnesota Vikings? He just sat around with Kyle Shanahan and was the backup quarterback to Brock Purdy in San Francisco. He did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. Quarterbacks are the most valuable currency in the NFL. The 49ers, because of the way that they approach free agency and such, they may get a compensatory pick for Sam Darnold. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know the formula, but when you get a guy that signs a $10 million deal somewhere, that impacts your roster in a variety of ways. Then now you're going to be able to get the next guy who wants to be a reclamation project coming to your program, wanting to be on your team. And I think it just has such a valuable impact overall. When you look at just the whole spectrum of there's no downside to it. The Jets are footing half the bill for Zach Wilson's salary in 2024. So the Broncos are only on the hook for $2.75 million. He's still only 24 years old, which to me, Cody, I mean, he's definitely not a finished product in the NFL. I think there's room to grow. I think he could. We've seen examples of this lately of guys that have emerged as way better players in their late 20s, mid 20s than they were in their early formative years, like Geno Smith, Ryan Tannehill. There's so many examples out there right now of guys that have become better the longer they've been in the league, even after they were written off. So I'm not saying Zach Wilson is going to come out and be the next Hollywood story. I'm not saying he's going to be, the next Kurt Warner or something like that. What I am saying is that he's too talented to be discarded at the age of 24. I think a lot of fans on Twitter would love to be able to do that, to just say, oh, screw it. He sucked for his first 3 years. He didn't show enough to me. He wasn't Patrick Mahomes. He wasn't, Justin Herbert. He wasn't all these other guys early on in his career. And so obviously he's a bust. I just don't buy into that. I don't abide by that sort of thinking. And I don't think Sean Payton does either. How often have we seen this in his career? Drew Brees discarded by the Chargers. Sean Payton wants him. Jameis Winston discarded by the Bucs after throwing 30 interceptions in a season. Sean Payton wants him. Teddy Bridgewater has, a freak leg injury that derails his entire NFL career, and he goes out and plays decent in the preseason. Sean Payton wants him, trades for him. So we've seen this multiple times over where guys that know ball, know the quarterback. I know that phrase is becoming way too popular these days, but look, Sean Payton knows the quarterback position. He does. And he called out Zach Wilson early this offseason as the most, I think, unfairly hated quarterback in the league. He specifically named him when he was asked that question. I just think it's true. He's unfairly hated for no reason. We make fun of the Jets situation all the time on Twitter, Broncos fans included. I mean, people are constantly making fun of the Jets, their circumstances, their coaching, just the fact that organization seems cursed. And then we don't want the quarterback who was in that bad situation, even though we would have killed to have him in the 2021 draft. It's just funny to me how that all works, Cody. But I think opposite of a waste of time is the way that I'm going about this Zach Wilson deal.
And yeah, and I think he still has room to improve, and I think he can maybe change his story a little bit. And I also think we have to put it into the context what we've seen in the NFL in the last 2 years. I mean, Sayre, how many quarterbacks across the board, starters, backups, have had to play due to injuries or things like that in the NFL? They're looking at expanding from 17 regular season games to 18 regular season games. We're seeing more and more quarterbacks play in the NFL in today's current climate than we have, I think, ever in the history of the game. That's something that can't be discounted enough. And obviously, this is also coming off the news that the Broncos did release Ben DiNucci. So instead of 4 quarterbacks going into training camp, the Broncos are going to have Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, and Zach Wilson as the 3 QBs going into training camp here for the Broncos. And look, Broncos Country, want to know your thoughts on the subject matter. Was the Zach Wilson trade, in your opinion, was it a waste of time, or is there redeemable qualities to it? We want to hear from you on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. We're going to round things out, obviously, coming up here in the fourth quarter of our show today. We get another mailbag question asking whether or not Justin Simmons will be coming back to Denver. Is there a chance that he could? We'll tell you why we think that there's a less likely chance that he comes back here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, whether that's big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to be able to talk about things with somebody who is unbiased on your life. That's where therapy comes in, and BetterHelp is a great resource and a great tool that I've personally used before in the past that has helped me personally. When I first got on the beat as a reporter, you spend a lot of time on the road by yourself, and I had a really hard time dealing with the stress and anxiety of just trying to figure out whether or not I belong in this industry. I dealt with a lot of what we call imposter syndrome, and that's something that I worked with my therapist at BetterHelp. And she helped me establish tools that help me understand that I belong where I'm at right now. I've worked hard to be able to do it. And on top of that, she gave me ideas and she worked with me on establishing tools that I could use in my day-to-day life to deal with stress and anxiety when they come up, to where it doesn't impact me or derail me from accomplishing the goals that I have in my personal and my professional career. Therapy can be different for everyone, and most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we're going to analyze whether or not Justin Simmons may be coming back to the Denver Broncos. Is there still a chance that he can, as the team gets ready now for OTAs and minicamp ahead of NFL training camp inside of July? We'll break it all down on today's episode of the show. Real quick, wanted to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. Sayre, our final mailbag question of the day on today's episode of the show comes in from John Perkins, an avid listener here on Twitter. Always appreciate John. Always appreciate everyone who sends in their mailbag questions to us. Ask the question here. Is there a chance, because obviously Justin has been spotted lately in Denver. I mean, obviously he still lives here. He's been going to Nuggets games. He's been in the community. He's got some charity events that are coming up inside the Denver community as well. Is there a chance that the Broncos bring Justin Simmons back at some point of this offseason before they really get into the thick of things? To be honest with you, there is a chance, Sayre, that does happen, but I don't think it's as likely as most people want, especially as time inches a little bit closer. I think more so this is less likely because I think Justin is actually going to have a chance to land in a better situation than Denver when we talk about the best chance to win now.
Yeah, and that's what we want to see for him, obviously, right? Is want to see him get to a great situation. I'd love to be able to unretire the jersey behind me, although I know Justin won't be wearing that particular one again, even if he does come back to the Denver Broncos, right? But I mean, we'd love to see that. We'd love to have that kind of, I'm a Cubs fan. I don't know how many people know that, but there was a moment right before the spring training, the year the Cubs won the World Series, Cody, where Dexter Fowler, the starting center fielder, leadoff hitter, he had left in free agency, but he was still a free agent at the beginning of spring training. And he surprised the entire team by walking onto the field after signing his deal at spring training. And it was just this great moment that you knew, man, like the vibes are good right now as a Cubs fan. And you'd love to see something similar to that. Like, I know some fans were theorizing, like maybe Justin will announce his return by modeling the Broncos jerseys. And I love that idea. And I think in a fantasy world, like that would be amazing to see something like that happen, or, you know, to see at the first mandatory session of the offseason, like Justin's out there wearing 31. And I'll be interested to see when the Broncos finally do release these jersey numbers if 31 remains available, because you never know. I mean, that could give a hint as to the team's perception of, hey, we're leaving the door open for you. We're leaving your seat open. We're keeping number 31 open. We'll see what happens there when those jersey numbers are released. I'm sure this podcast will have released shortly after the jersey numbers get dropped by the Broncos, but that's just how things work. But I'd love to see it, Cody, but at the same time, if he goes to anybody that's not the Chiefs or the Raiders or the Chargers and is able to have some success this year, I think that would be awesome to see for Justin. As we know, he put in the time, he put in the work, he did the blood, sweat, and tears with Denver, and it just didn't work out. I want to see him have individual success for sure.
I think the fact that obviously we look at the free agency market right now, we look at the safety market from a financial aspect here, and it's a little mind-boggling at how it's changed all of a sudden this offseason, and teams are going younger, they're going more cost-effective. Like just 2 or 3 years ago, the safety position was one of the highest paid positions in all of football. I mean, you'd see like, okay, hey, what was it? I think 2018 or 2019 wasn't Eddie Jackson or one of those guys that reset the safety market. Then all of a sudden Justin comes in and resets the safety market. And then the safety market gets reset once again. And now it's like, hey, okay, we paid a lot of money here for this position. Just because the too high look has now become a thing, like Vic Fangio. Thank you to Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio got a lot of dudes at the safety position paid in the NFL because of the too high shell and the ability to play the post and also play down in the box. But I think what surprises me is the fact that Justin, who's been obviously the NFL leader since 2016 in interceptions and a guy who is consistently great on and off the field, for him to still be a free agent right now is a little interesting to me. Now, look, part of it is, hey, you just have to be patient. Like that's what the market is saying right now to his agent. It's what it's saying right now to him is, hey, stay patient. This has nothing to do with you and the type of player you are. This has everything to do with where teams are at financially as teams wrap up their NFL draft classes, trying to get these guys signed. Once you see a lot of these teams formalize and finalize their rookie contracts, you are going to see, I think, a little bit of run on some free agent guys, Justin included. Now, I think it's more likely that Simmons lands on a contender potentially before the month of July, but I think some teams that Broncos country maybe need to keep an eye out on, including Denver. I think you have to keep an eye on the Houston Texans. I think you have to keep an eye on the Miami Dolphins. The San Francisco 49ers honestly seem like the best overall fit for what Justin can do. And I think you put him on that defense, man, that right there, I think that's probably the more favorite to make it to the Super Bowl out of the NFC is obviously going to be San Francisco, knowing what we know about them and how talented they are. And I also think maybe a little underdog kind of team to keep an eye on here would be the Pittsburgh Steelers, pairing him up alongside Minkah Fitzpatrick. Then that would lead to some interesting storylines as the Steelers would obviously come to play Denver this year as well. Not only are you going to get Russell Wilson returning to Denver, but if that were the case, you get Justin Simmons returning to Denver to take on the Broncos. It would be so weird just to see that happen. But those are, I think, the 5 teams I think Broncos fans should keep an eye on right now as it pertains to the market here for Justin Simmons. Don't be surprised. And look, I know you already said this. Don't be surprised if the Kansas City Chiefs poke around and have a little bit of interest in him. We all know Patrick Mahomes is a huge fan of Justin Simmons. Patrick Mahomes has been on the record on the NFL 100 say, hey, this is the one guy who always has my number. He's always the one guy that when we're doing our film study, I know that he's going to try to make a play on me, and he has consistently. So do not be surprised if the Kansas City Chiefs make a little bit of a run at Justin Simmons a little bit towards before July happens. Keep an eye on that. I know it'd be the worst case scenario. I know it'd make a lot of Broncos fans mad. I hope it wouldn't change how Broncos fans feel about Justin, but look, it's the business side of the NFL. You want to play, you want to win a ring. Obviously, I think San Francisco, Kansas City, those are the 2 teams. And maybe Houston as an underdog radar. Like, I think that those 3 teams would be like the best case scenario here for Justin if he truly wants to win.
Yeah, I think that him signing with Kansas City would I'm trying to find the right words. It would feel it would be the, like you said, worst case scenario. Let's just put it that way. It would really suck given the fact that Justin has poured his whole career up to this point into beating the Chiefs and being a Denver Bronco and exemplifying everything that it means to be a Denver Bronco, then to go play for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that would be brutal. That would be a tough pill to swallow, and maybe bordering on the unforgivable. But at the same time, Cody, we love Justin. We're going to see the best into existence here. The interesting thing as time does go along is, and not that Justin can't pick up any defense, but I mean, there's other elements to being on a team at this late stage of the offseason, or as the offseason gets later. It's still only May. I'm not trying to overplay that or anything. I mean, if he signs before training camp, he should be able to pick up any defense and get acclimated to any locker room. But I do think there's some value to that, getting signed earlier in the offseason to be able to get acclimated to your new surroundings, your new coaches. And that's where, like you said, the more time goes along, maybe the more familiarity plays into the equation there. Justin played his high school ball in Florida, so I think the Dolphins suggestion that you brought up is a good one, especially with all the losses they suffered on that side of the ball. So really excited to see where he ends up, as long as it's not, especially not Kansas City or the AFC West in general. But man, the best free agent available right now by far. So it'll be a storyline, I think, for the entire rest of NFL fandom to be monitoring closely.
Well, Broncos Country, we want to hear from you on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Great mailbag question sent in from our friend John Perkins. Look, we're going to do a mailbag once a week here, Locked On Broncos. We'll put a tweet out there on social media for you to be able to do, and we're going to select the 3 best ones to feature here on the show. You can get that every week as we go throughout the offseason here on Locked On Broncos. But with that said, Broncos Country, we want you to enjoy your weekend here this week. Obviously, the Broncos have rookie minicamp on Friday. If there's anything pressing, you can expect news here out of the Locked On Broncos podcast. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Sayre's going to have a solo episode for you all on Monday for your viewing and listening pleasure. We appreciate you so much for rocking with us. We'll see you next time for a brand new episode of the show.